Welcome to today's class. As the background music sings along, it tells you we are analyzing, or we are going to introduce an interesting novel. And that novel is based on the Maasai culture. I just picked that song to set us so that you can know the kind of novel that you're introducing. And this is a novel that you interact with through your Form 3 to Form 4. And you'll be examining it in paper 2 as an excerpt, and in paper 3 as an essay question. So it's a really, really important text that you are going to involve in. So my work today, in the 30 or so minutes, I'll introduce the text and probably find ways of making the reading of the text enjoyable. First and foremost, before we look at a text, what is needed of us? So we are going to look at certain things that are really necessary for us to start before we start reading a text. So the blossoms of Savannah Savanna, as I said, is a novel that is set in the society, the Maasai society, and there are certain things that we are going to look at before we start analyzing the text or reading the text further. We are going to look at the cover page. And in the cover page, there are certain things that we are going to ask ourselves, and there are certain things that we are going to try and find out about the text that the cover page will likely tell us. For instance, we look at the title itself, and in the title, we are going to look at the words that are in there. What do we mean by blossoms? And what do we mean by Savannah? We'll further look at the pictorial presentation and find out what the picture is telling us about the text. So just before we continue, maybe we go through some slides and see what the title of the blossoms of the Savannah tells us. So blossoms of Savannah. Blossoms of Savannah has that page. That is the pictorial presentation and the title. So we are going to look at what does it mean to blossoms, to blossom. To blossom, we know it's flowers or plants that blossom. When they start flowering, we say they are blossoming. And when we see flowers or plants blossoming, when they're producing flowers, then we start thinking of what they'll provide for us. They'll give us seeds at the end of it, or they give us fruits and we'll enjoy eating this. Then the Savannah. Those who are taking geography or geographically, Savannah is a grassy plain. Very few trees. The rainfalls are confined to maybe one season. And so we could generally say that it's a dry land or a dry climate. But there's something that I found out that is, as a learner, we should know, is that the Savannah lies between transitional climate or transitional zone. And when we talk about transitional zones here, we are talking about we are talking about that it is between these zones that can either integrate or blend to come together. So you'll find that it lies between rainforest, it lies between the savanna grassland and desert. So after some time, they can integrate or blend and become one climatic region, but sometimes they don't. So this is of very importance in the text, because we'll find out that there are characters who try to blossom, characters who try to come out, and they thrive in this kind of climate. So Savannah here could be this harsh climate that these characters try to thrive in. And there's that possibility because Savannah is lying between transitional zone. Already the author in the title is telling us of a possibility of these cultures blending or integrating and forming one, or them disintegrating and becoming so different. So as we read the story, we want to find out how this is true or how this is not true. When we come at the pictorial presentation, in the pictorial presentation, there are some three key things that we look at. One is the sunrise. The sunrise gives us a sign of a new beginning. When we wake up in the morning and we see the sun rises, we think, oh, today is going to be good. And even the English says, a new day is seen in the morning. It's seen in the morning when the sun rises. If we wake up and it's gloomy, then we know it's most probably going to rain or it's going to be a gloomy day and a very cold day. So sunrise here is a sign of a new beginning. We want to see in this savannah where things are so hard, how is this sun going to help the flowers that are blossoming? How is this new beginning? What is this new beginning? And how is it going to affect others who have not embraced this new beginning? Remember, not everyone likes the sun rising. There are others who will always want to stay in the dark. And so the author is presenting two diverse categories of people. Those will enjoy the sunrise and those will not enjoy the sunrise. So as we read, we start thinking of who is going to bring this new beginning. Are others going to enjoy this new beginning and accept it, of course? If not, then what takes place? The other thing that is very peculiar in the pictorial presentation of the title page is the cover page is the blossoming flowers or the blooming flowers. As we mentioned, there's blossoms, there's blooming. There are blossoms within the savanna. Blossom is a type of a flower. So they are in the savanna, a very a dry land with the worst climate, very harsh one. So there are flowers that are blooming there and they are thriving in this. And if we look at it, I'm going to show it again. If we look at that cover page, you'll realize that there's green vegetation there. So this also shows us that most probably we are going to read of characters that have bloomed, characters that have thrived in the blossoms of Savannah. Then lastly, in the picture, there's the beaded ornament. Just when you look at the the right-hand corner, you'll realize there's a beaded ornament there. Could be a bracelet, could be some a necklace, or because the Ma people are, and this is one of the tradition, their attires, their clothing. But what interests me is that it is shown at the darker part of the page. If you look at this, just to show this, you'll realize it's somewhere here. It's at the darker part of the page, not where the sun is rising. And that itself could have a meaning, that the culture, the Ma culture, is remaining in the dark as there are flowers that are blooming in the sunrise. Could it be that when we are reading the text, there are some cultures that will remain in the dark and be gone, or there are some that will still try to penetrate the sunrise? So you see, this text is really this novel is really going to be an interesting read. Just to share again on that picture, maybe just to let us see again the pictorial presentation of what I was saying earlier. Sorry about that. Just to show the pictorial presentation of what I was talking of earlier on. You'll realize this is the sun that I was saying, and then the blooming, the blossoms, the flowers that are blooming there, and the green vegetation down there. We could also see the plains. If you're very keen, you'll see the plains there. And then, of course, just look at my cursor there. That is the bracelet or the beaded ornament that I'm talking of. See the color there, it's a bit darker. And so it could be something that the author is trying to tell us, that as the sun rises, remember the sun, by the time it will be midday, there'll be no darkness. And so the author is trying to show us something that is going to happen in the text. Well, after we look at the cover page, then we are still, there's still more that we need to ask ourselves. How then will we do the reading of the text? How best do we do the reading of the novel? So, what is expected of reading the novel is that we'll do it as an intensive reading. And what is intensive reading? Try and think about it. It comes from the word intense. What does it mean to do something intensely? So there are certain, we'll be looking at, when we're doing this intensive reading, we'll be looking at trying to identify the events in a chronological way. We'll also look at the use of language. And when we talk about the use of language, start thinking of the styles, those styles that have been introduced to you, from vivid description, the use of figurative languages, the style that the author employs to bring out the intended meaning. We'll, as we do the intensive reading, we'll be looking at the text in details. So trying to find the details And the details here, we are looking at the surface meaning and inferred meaning. What do we mean by this? When we are talking about surface meaning, it's just the normal reading and understanding it as the language. But when we talk about inferred meaning, we want to see the character's behavior. What do they tell us? What do we learn from it? If it is, there's an event that takes place, then we are asking ourselves, what is this event leading to? Why does the author decide to use this event? For instance, if the author could deliberately use vivid description to describe someone, then from this description, we could tell the character trait of this person. So we'll enjoy the vivid description, the image that is created, but from that image that the author creates, we'll be able to infer the meaning that the author intends to bring out. So you'll realize that apart from the extensive reading that we've been doing, where you pick a novel, read it, enjoy it, you pick a class reader, read it, enjoy it, you pick a newspaper, read it, enjoy it, you just skim and scan through. This one will be a little bit detailed. Of course, we'll enjoy the reading aloud in class, you'll enjoy it. But the most important thing is that we'll be trying to get details from the text. And this will be guided. It will be a guided reading. So it will depend with how in the following lessons, you'll realize we'll be reading a chapter and then try and find the details from that chapter. We'll be reading a section and try and find the details from that chapter. And there is one thing that will be very important when we are doing intensive reading. And I'll say we'll move from the normal way of analyzing a text or understanding text. And what we are going to do now, we are going to do an episode analysis, or simply said, episodic analysis. So we'll be doing episodic, And the reason why I'll pick episodic analysis, or why we should do episodic analysis, is that, remember I said, we are going to concentrate on analyzing the intensive reading, which requires us to not only look at the text in a surface view, but intensely go deep and dig deeper into what the text is all about, finding the details. And so when we do the intensive reading therefore, we'll need a type of analysis that will help us. And you'll realize that nowadays, even exams has moved. The paper 3 has moved from just writing an essay. They want details from those essays. They want events from those essays. So what is episodic analysis, or why is episodic analysis important? Let us just look at some work that I wrote down, and maybe from there we'll pick on something. I've already gone through the intensive reading, maybe just to mention a few that we didn't look at, for example, interpretive there, and so on. But now we are moving from the intensive reading, or where we are completely going to deconstruct the text, and we want to move to episodic analysis. And we are asking ourselves, Why episodic analysis? Why should we do episodic analysis? We are doing episodic analysis because we are interested in knowing what the plot of the story is. And the first thing that we always do after reading a novel is to ask ourselves, what are the events that are leading to form the whole story? So the plot analysis will know the plot of the story. Then it will also help us to know the characters and their traits. Why is that so? Why is that possible that we'll know the characters and their traits? It's important because we are not only going to look at a character and what they do, but we're going to look at this character. What are they thinking about? What are their reactions to events? What do they say about other characters? What do they think about a certain issue or an event? And so knowing the character will also lead us into knowing the thematic concerns. And that is the next thing. We'll be able to pick on the major themes that the author is advancing. We'll be able also, as I mentioned earlier, in intensive reading, we want to know the language that has been used. We'll know the language. And this is important because this is an integrated approach of learning. We are not going just to look at the literature, the literary analysis, but we'll be able to pick the sentence structures, the word choices of the author, the vocabularies that have been used there. So how do we how do we identify episodes in a text or in a novel? So after reading, we first identify the event. What is taking place? What is happening at that time? Who is involved? So we pick the characters. Who is involved in that event? Who are the characters who are mentioned or who are making that event takes place? Then we look, what are some of the actions and activity that go together with this event? If it is, I'll use the example. If it's the welcoming ceremony at Uncle Simirian's house, who is there? We've picked the event at Uncle Simirian's home. Who is there? Ole Kahelo, the daughters, Taiyo and Arezian, the mother, Mama Milanoi, the uncle's wife, the uncle's children. And so we get to know what are some of the activities that are taking place there. Who is doing these activities? Who is involved in doing these activities? Then we look at what is their reaction and what is your reaction as a reader. If, for example, we'll reach a place now where the author is trying to give us how was the character angry about it? Were they happy, laughing about it? Were they crying? Then what does that make you feel as a reader? Then what is the outcome of that event? What do we learn from that event? What is the theme that the author is trying to pass through that event? So you'll realize that doing an episodic analysis per se will not only lead us to the intensive reading, but it will be giving us more on our analysis. So as we've said earlier on, we are going to look at the events that are taking place. The events will also look at, we are also going to look at the characters involved, and we'll also look at the characters' reaction. reactions to these events, the activities around these events. We look at the moral lesson or the theme that comes out.